garden for the ecosystem to work, right? Like it's just the assumptions of all of life that difference is good and that too much similarity might create a vulnerability. So it's funny that we talk in our world so often about, well, don't talk about differences, only talk about things we have in common. Well, that's because difference has gotten a bad rap. We should start to say, when something's different, that's all kinds of possibility. And that's what I see going on in A Piece of My Mind. And what you all are up to is saying, look, these people, they're not all like each other. And that's a good thing. That we didn't cluster together all the birds of a feather, right, but that there's some variety here, and that's where the magic is.
You know, there's one of the subjects in the project. His name is Julius Collins, and he talks about the fact that you don't want to go down an avenue planting all elm trees. You don't want to plant all the same kind because Dutch elm disease will come in and wipe it out. So you want to mix it in. You want to change it up a little bit, and through that process, we're all stronger.
Yeah, that's the way it is in every part of life. So when we tell stories that, well, the only thing, you know, what you really want to do is be around those people that are similar to you, that's not actually true. Like, we have to work really hard to be convinced of that. Right. Because we know that distinction and differences and all that is where the strength comes from. And I think that's part of what's going on in the in the project. Now, so John, I want to ask you a little bit more about these figures, these characters that you have in this. Did these folks, were they open to talking about the struggles that they have in being a peaceful person in the world or bringing about peace? Yeah.
In fact, there were very few questions that I led these people with. You know, basically, it almost turned into a monologue where people were sharing. But one of the questions I did ask was, what are some of the obstacles that you encounter along the way? And you know, people talk about things like fear. Mm-hmm. People talk about things like political rhetoric. When we play to the fear that's in us, when we start to think about, you know, us versus them, mm-hmm, or sort of this mentality of scarcity, that there's not enough of, you know, fill in the blank to go around in the world, it starts to close you off, and it starts to really put up walls between you and other people. Mm-hmm. When you can turn that around and you can look at it with compassion, if you can look at it from a source of abundance, that there's plenty to be shared, and if we are all working hand in hand, that we're all going to be better off in the end. You know, some of those obstacles fall away.
And are these people that are all from Minnesota? Are they from different parts of the country? Who are the 52?
Yeah, for logistics reasons, mm-hmm, most of them are Minnesotans. Yeah. It has, I think, a broader view than that, because we've got Somali refugees, we've got people really from all continents who are part of the project. Occasionally, there would be somebody who was going through town who I had a connection to. Uh-huh. The head of the Lutheran Church in Central African Republic was going through Minneapolis. Uh-huh. I happened to have someone that said, hey, do you want to talk to him? And of course I would want to include his voice. There was an Iraqi man who was here in the Twin Cities as part of a peace delegation that was visiting town, and I had the opportunity to talk with him. Mm-hmm. So there are some people who reside outside of the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. The vast majority were people I connected with here.
Yeah, and I actually think that's kind of positive in that sense, that in little old Minnesota, right, in little
we've got
Minneapolis,
we've got a lot of different people.
Yeah, there's all of this variety here, and that seems to, I think that's one of the factors that makes the Minneapolis-St. Paul, greater metropolitan area such a cauldron of goodness that happens, because a lot of really good things come out of Minneapolis and St. Paul, right? Like, there's a lot, and I think it's that kind of mix, that there's such distinction and such difference. And what I find impressive about this is you had to innovate this idea, right? Like you weren't modeling this documentary through narratives with black and white photography off of anyone else.
No, it kind of, in fact, when I began it, I had no idea what was going to come of it. It was sort of this path that I just felt like going down, and I didn't know what would be at the far end of it. Mm-hmm. But I just started walking, and slowly and little by little, it sort of got revealed to me, and I finally came to the conclusion that this could be a good public venue, came to the conclusion that it could be an exhibit, and we're hopeful at some point it'll become a book as well.
Well, that's fantastic, and that's why you get the right on from Doug Pagitt Radio, because we need more people who are willing to walk the path and not know where it's going to lead. Right. Like, a lot of people will count the costs ahead of time if they know what the outcome is. Not a lot of people will count the costs if they don't know where it's going to lead. right? They don't know if they want to go, if they want to try. And so here you were probably months and months into this project with the belief that something good could come from it, and you didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I just knew.
Is that true?
That's absolutely true. I'm grateful for a supportive wife and supportive friends who've encouraged me along the way. I really think that we shortchange ourselves on what our potential is sometimes. I think we look at the problems that the world faces and we think we can't possibly influence them. But I think that each of us really has a great deal of power in our own lives, in our own circles, with how we relate to people and how we view the world and respond to it. We have a great deal of power to work towards good.
Well, and we're glad for the work that you've done. And the documentary is called A Piece of My Mind. The opening, again, is this Wednesday, July 6th, over at the Wisdom Center on the campus of St. Catherine's University in St. Paul. And so, John Noltner, you get the Right On from Doug Pagitt Radio. Now, we've been talking for months that we wanted to put together a little award that someone gets. And now we're... Still don't have
still
it.
Talking.
Right. We still talking. Yeah, we still don't have it. So if we ever put one of those together, we'll send it in the mail for you. A Right On for those whose strength brings strength, whose faith brings faith, whose hope brings hope, and whose love brings love. So congratulations on the project. And folks, maybe we'll see you over there on Wednesday. And if not, we'll talk to you again next week on Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and over at DougPagittRadio.com.